You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All right, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Gentlemen, how we doing tonight?
Doing good. So we got the combine behind us, and all the excitement of the underwear Olympics that goes on, and certainly the hype. The hype train is real right now. We'll get into that here later on in the show, but it's definitely flowing. And then really we got some franchise tags. We got a Derek Carr signing, and we have college basketball. I mean, it's kind of what's going on. So there's actually more than that. There's quite a bit going on in the sports world, honestly, between hockey and basketball getting close to their postseason, baseball's in spring training, and all the news and notes. If you're a seam head, golf is alive and well. NASCAR's, at the beginning of their season still. So, I mean, there's tons to watch if you're a sports fan, just of everything right now. But as far as football goes, this is what's most important. The combine's over, so now we all get to speculate and, drafts and rookie drafts and, prognostications and bold takes and everything else. And it's the time of the year we're in. So I'm all about it, man. Let's have some fun.
Yeah, next up is pro days that we can look forward to, the circus that goes to each college campus for some of those, high-end draft pick potentials. And then there's a couple diamonds in the rough that get discovered at a few of those. But yeah, to Kevin's other point, it is getting to be like one of those really fantastic times as a sports fan, like just in general, like you can flip something on and like you turn your TV on and there's something to watch. I mean, even in the middle of the day, there's UEFA Champ League soccer is on. Like you have that. You've got Champ Week going on for college basketball. You mentioned NASCAR. F1 just started their season last weekend. They've got a couple weeks off before their next race. It is a great time. Soon, before you know it, we'll be into April. We'll be wrapping up March Madness. We'll be getting ready for the Masters. Baseball regular season will be kicking off, so it is fun.
54 games. I'm sticking to that. You want to make
54 games.
Any 54 games, doesn't matter. You want to make baseball exciting and people want to tune in and watch it, make the regular season 54 games.
There you go.
You want to make the NBA better, make it where 2/3 of the league don't make the playoffs.
Ugh, yeah. Well, there's going to be a lot to own.
I'm just full of hot takes right over here. It's just
you got to
right off the bat.
But today was a very exciting day.
All about the mighty dollar.
Yeah. Today was an exciting day in the NFL. We got some movement in terms of free agency. Some dominoes were falling. Some more cap casualties happened since we last spoke. Obviously, the Derek Carr signing is kind of big and kind of funny too. That the team that he went and visited when he was still on the Las Vegas roster, technically still under their control. He goes and visits them and then says, "Nah, you're not going to trade me." Forces to get cut so that the Raiders get nothing in return for him going to the team that he ended up visiting, that they wanted to trade him to in the first place. And then, of course, the franchise tags, which I know we can get into it, but if you don't mind, Derek, if we can, was there anything that surprised you? By my count, I saw 6 franchise tags handed out today.
Yeah, there was certainly a bunch of franchise tags coming down, right? You had Tony Pollard getting franchise tagged, Saquon Barkley getting franchise tagged at the deadline, right? Like I was one of those. I heard that they talked all along that the Daniel Jones deal was going to come down to the wire, and I remember looking at that, trying to see if I could find any news at what was 1:55 our time. Deadline's 2:00. Our time here. And so I'm sitting there looking at that going, man, there's nothing out there, nothing being reported. All of a sudden, like right at the deadline, we've got a deal done and Saquon's tagged. Like snuck it in like right underneath there. Geno signed his deal there as well. So there's been a lot of kind of moving and grooving and shakings out that have kind of happened here as we start heading into what was the deadline for the tag. And as we start now getting the legal tampering period. And, a lot more teams still needing to get under the cap here in about a week, March 15th, where they need to all come in under the salary cap going in for next year. So very interesting. things going on there. So
there were some big fantasy relevant names that did get tagged, right? Like the 6 tags we have: Baltimore tagged Lamar, the Cowboys tagged Tony Pollard, the Jags tagged Evan Ingram, the Raiders tagged Josh Jacobs, the Giants tagged Saquon, and the Commanders they tagged a defensive tackle. So really nothing fantasy wise there. Important nevertheless in terms of actual football, but for our purposes doesn't really mean nothing. But the Giants tagging Saquon, I was talking with a buddy of mine today when that happened, and he's getting $10 million, and we I think we kind of anticipated that they were gonna have to tag, right? They had to tag one or the other, right? They were either gonna have to tag Jones or tag Saquon. I'm not surprised that they went the route that they went, because I think Jones's price, good or not,
that was not a good price, by the way.
I don't think it was a good price, but I don't think they get a better price. I don't think they get a better option at a better price.
If they didn't have to tag Saquon, the move would have been to put the non-exclusive tag on him, let him go out there and test the markets, because I don't think any other team was clamoring to go sign him 4 years, $60 million type of thing. So they would have been paying him $32 million this year. If some team goes out there and wants to try and one up that deal or sign him to something like that, they get 2 firsts in exchange for that. So that's why I think the Ravens, in the move that they made a lot of sense there. You tag Lamar, right, with the non-exclusive tag. He's free to go out there and really try and determine what his worth is out there on the open market, and see what that really is. See if he can get that contract deal to the point where the Ravens can then either match it, or they can say, that's okay. We'll take 2 first-round picks and we'll move on.
Yeah, it's the Ravens calling Lamar's bluff, right? Like, you're not as valuable as you think you are, But what I do think it hurts, though, is I think it hurts the relationship by them doing the non-exclusive, because now Lamar's feelings are going to get hurt, and this is what he's going to be thinking about going into camp. And does he sign the tag, or does he sit out to try and get the long-term deal? And, this, that, and the other. So I understand the business side of things to a sense of trying to prove your point of, hey, you have a overinflated value for yourself here at the moment. But I don't see how it does them a great deal of favors going into this upcoming season, because Lamar is going to be thinking about just about anything else besides the 2023 season. We'll see how that looks come, OTAs and fall camp. But that situation's still interesting, guys. Like, I feel like there's a whole lot going on behind the scenes that, good for both sides, that they haven't let out and everything else, because I really think this one could have got pretty dang ugly if Lamar and his people, mainly, his publicist and mom and, who everybody else in his camp, right? I'm not sure who all is on the payroll, but you guys know what I mean, would have gotten sour and started letting some of that stuff, continue to slide out. And who knows, maybe it still will if they can't come to terms and he says, I'm not playing for the tag, and trying to hold their feet to the fire, because we all saw how bad they are without him.
Right.
But I mean, that also begs the question too, right? Like, if you're the Ravens, you sign him to the non-exclusive, right? He's now free to go out there and actually explore and see what teams would offer him, right? Like, is there a team that's going to go out there and offer him the Deshaun Watson contract, which is what he sounds like he's so heavily after, with all the money guaranteed up there in the $50 million a year range? Like, is there a team that's going to go out there and do it? Is
there even a team in a position to do that?
The Bears have got the cap to do it, but I don't think that the Bears are going to do that. Plus, if they do that, then the number 1 pick gets shipped over to Baltimore. And at which point Baltimore's, yep, okay, sounds great. See ya.
Yeah, right.
We'll draft our next QB and we'll move on. Yeah, the Texans have a lot of cap space out there. The Colts actually have a fair bit of cap space as well, right? Like all of these teams are teams that are quarterback needy, quarterback hungry, and could go out there and potentially try and sign him. But the question is there a team that's going to go out there and try and sign him for that long-term deal, for
And
fully guaranteed?
right. And realistically, those teams, they aren't just a quarterback away. They need to take advantage of having a good draft and being, having some savvy free agent signings this year to help make them competitive again. It's not just a quarterback away. And with what he's asking, man, that is crazy. Back to my point about Daniel Jones, though, I think the Giants got a decent deal here. I think
you're paying him the same amount that you're paying Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
Would you rather have Daniel Jones or Dak Prescott?
I mean, let's go back to just last season. They finished one round shy of each other, right?
Yeah, I mean, same division. They come in third versus second in the division.
And they still made the playoffs.
Sure.
I mean,
but that had a lot to do with the fact they all played the AFC South.
More
so than anything.
So that same with Dak.
Right.
Got to play the AFC South too. Anyways, here's what I'm saying about it though. Like they had a choice. They needed to make sure that the price for Daniel Jones doesn't go up, because if you tag him this year, that price is much bigger next year, right? With the new salary cap, with the increased TV money, that price goes way up, way up. So I think what you do is you sign Jones to the long-term deal, put Saquon on a prove it, right? Because you can. We all know that the life of an NFL running back is short, especially one who runs as violent as Saquon. And we've already seen him have some injury issues, right? Missed time. So you don't want to invest long-term in that, because there is in the back of your mind reliability issues, right, wrong, or indifferent. That is, the case. So I think the Giants did the right thing. Like, I don't like to sing the praises of the New York Giants here, because they've pretty much been the epitome of poor management in terms of personnel over the last, really since Eli's, the second half of Eli's career. That I think they did the right thing here and secured the more surefire and, in my opinion, more important position. I shouldn't say in my opinion. I think that's a fact. The quarterback is the most important position on the field. And in some ways, it's the enemy, right? Like it's the one which is a little bit easier to deal with than the one you don't.
I think the Giants made the best decision for the options they had. Now, if they would have been in a draft situation like what they were last year with 2 first-round picks and everything else, I don't think this deal gets done. I think they let Jones walk. I think the fact that they are drafting at the bottom of the first round and they don't have those 2 top 7 picks that they had.
Number 5, number 7.
Year. Like, I think that kind of adds to it, on top of the fact that this quarterback class is not necessarily being heralded as, an all-pro quarterback class, sans, the hype, right? There's some good athletes in this class, but I'm not sure how it's going to work out playing quarterback in the NFL necessarily. So I think their hands are tied. There weren't better options. I think when it came down to what Dable wanted and everything else, it was the devil,
Right.
And it's not the sexiest pick. I'm sure New York Giants fans are mixed and probably more so frustrated than not with this signing. But really, what other option did you have, right? You could have brought Jimmy G in. Like, you could have done that.
Right.
But what you do is you're already revamping the skill position players in New York. So if you bring Jimmy G in, you're still teaching a new quarterback, a new offense, a new terminology, because what Brian Daboll does is completely different than what Kyle Shanahan does for the most part. Jimmy G does not have the ability to use his legs like Daniel Jones does to kind of break some of that out, so it becomes a little bit more predictable. So then you're putting more pressure on Saquon, and if he's really the straw that mixes the drink there in New York, you don't want to overwork him. You want his touches to be high impact touches, right? You want to keep him in that 15 to 18 touch range per game, but you want them to be high impact touches, however that looks. So it wasn't a good free agent class for it. It wasn't a good draft class for it. And you got to stick with the guy I think that's why it's a 4-year, not a 6-year or 7-year like you've seen with some of these deals.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because you're right, looking at it, right? Who are they going to bring in instead? The free agents still out there: Carson Wentz, Marcus Mariota, Baker, Sam Darnold, Jimmy G, Teddy Bridgewater, Case Keenum, Mason Rudolph, Jacoby Brissett. Yet none of those guys are going to really get the job done. Jimmy G is probably the headliner at this point.
He would have had the best chance for success.
Right. But yeah, and that's part of the reason too that I think if the Giants didn't have to try and get a deal done with Jones to then use the franchise tag on Saquon, we would have seen the Giants go out and use probably the non-franchise tag on him and say, okay, go out there, test the waters, because I don't know that there's another team that's beating down the door to try and sign him to even $35 million a year on average for 4 years type of thing, right? Like, I just don't see it happening out there. Even with some of these teams that are quarterback needy, like I don't necessarily see it happening there. What team's going to go out there and sign Daniel Jones besides the Giants to like a 4-year, $160 million deal? I don't think the
Carolina,
maybe
that's
Carolina,
maybe Tampa Bay,
maybe.
Like, and that's the thing. There's a bunch of maybes. Like, I don't think that they're worried about him going across town to the Jets, right? They are kind of in Aaron Rodgers or bust mode, as Aaron follows the path of Brett Favre.
Yes, very much so.
I'm telling you, those Packers QBs, man, they're self-inflated sense of worth.
Right. So I think you're right. Like, I'm not quite sure where he would have gone, but again,
I mean, Vegas,
you do overpay to keep what you know, right? It's the
Right.
gamble, right? The class isn't as strong. You know that the free agent market isn't that strong. So either you're going to have to pay 35 plus to Jimmy Garoppolo, who himself has not been healthy, right? He has injury questions and everything else. Daniel Jones is pretty damn durable, guys. Like, even through the running and all the sacks that he's taken, like,
and he's 5 years younger than Jimmy G.
Exactly. So I understand it. Do we love it? Maybe not. Giants fans, some of them, I'm sure, shouting from the rooftops, like I said, but it just wasn't a high profile year. Like, so this is the market it is. And be happy that you have a guy who's a fraction. Like, by the time these cap increases come in and everything else, you have a guy who's going to be a minimal percentage of your salary cap in relation to dang near everybody else that you're going to be playing, right? Because Jalen Hurts is coming up. You think he's going to be taking a deal that sweet? Absolutely not. And they're not in the same caliber right now, and I understand that, but the cap space is the same, right? You got to pay to keep Jalen Hurts there, and you have an A.J. Brown that you kind of sold the farm for, and you have a defense that you want to try and keep intact because you like rotating your 7 defensive linemen in and out of the game. And I mean, Philly has their own problems coming up, guys. So
yes,
and I know I'm kind of getting off on it, but the Giants still have a ton of cap space left, right? So they did this. They still have tons of cap space to go and try and figure out what they're going to do for, some better weapons, some more relevant weapons for the Giants, whether they look at that in the draft, whether they end up signing one out of free agency, and retool the wide receiver room, because Galladay, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, Hodges, who they did bring back, but these guys weren't the answer, right? This isn't what's going to work for them.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm just trying to look at the other teams that potentially could have tried to go out there and do it. Maybe Atlanta, who has a ton of cap space. Houston, I don't think if Houston goes out and signs somebody as a quarterback in this free agency class, I know you're shaking your head, but they could go out there and really try and make a run at Jimmy G, right? Like they could. Houston would be looking for a bridge quarterback, right? Bring somebody in, take the pressure off of the guy that you're going to be drafting, likely number 2 overall at quarterback, unless you trade up to 1 to try and make that happen. Like you're good, you take some pressure off of your first or second overall pick there, and bring in a guy like Jimmy G and let him take all the lumps while they kind of rebuild and retool that offense.
But you have that in Davis Mills.
Yeah, you already have that there.
Like,
Sure.
I mean, and he's a hell of a lot cheaper. So then you can go around and continue to build around that, right? You can look at, all right, let's get a couple, see if we can take a stab at offensive linemen. Let's say, or Orlando Brown. That's who, if I'm the Texans, I'm going after. With the Chiefs not tagging Orlando Brown, if I'm the Texans, I'm throwing all sorts of money at him. Hey, come down here to Houston. We'll have, this young up-and-coming quarterback. Yes, we're retooling our wide receiver core, but, we're competitive. We're on our way trending up, and see if you can get a guy like that to come down and protect your quarterback and spend your money that way, right?
Yeah.
Because we've seen in a lot of instances that's the best, quickest way to turn a team around and get to the promised land, right? The Tom Brady, Matt Stafford sign, go to the Super Bowl and win it thing is very rare, right? It took Peyton Manning 4 years after they signed him to be able to do that. A lot of guys don't ever get the opportunity after they jump ship and go to another team to compete for Super Bowl. So you're better off building in the trenches, right? Inside to out. We talk about this. They may not be fantasy relevant, but they sure are like NFL extremely relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And especially the offensive line is still fantasy relevant in a piece that we probably don't touch on enough because it's how some of these schemes work. But if I were Houston, that's where I'd be looking to spend money. It's not necessarily the quarterback. We can live with Davis Mills for 1 more year as we draft the guy and groom him. Let's start building this offensive line. Like let's get these workhorses up front, into a cohesive unit. So now this young quarterback has that extra half second to read a defense and diagnose plays because they can't go through David Carr 2.0.
No.
Right? They just can't. And they right, wrong, or different. They got lucky with Deshaun, how he came out and was kind of lightning in the bottle there. But I mean, the beating that David Carr took dang near set that franchise back 10 years.
Realistically, the beating that Deshaun took too. I mean, it wasn't exactly pretty, his first couple of years there.
No, it's talent. It was athleticism, right?
Yeah,
it was just his raw athleticism and the fact that he had a live arm and DeAndre Hopkins there.
Yeah. He had a cheat code at playing wide receiver. Yeah. The other thing that I will say, though, and this is a good point to kind of refresh everybody, the year – I think it was Dak's rookie year, and it was the reason why he was so successful was because Dallas had the best O-line in the league. By all the measurables, Dallas's O-line was spectacular, and that really helped Dak, kind of become this quarterback that we all think that Dak is, and it allowed him to grow some confidence in playing in the NFL because he had a stellar line in front of him. So that's really what helped, develop him into the quarterback that he is. So, he had confidence in knowing that he wasn't going to be under pressure, the second the center hands the ball to him.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts this year, right? Some of that jump. Yes, it was the work he put in the offseason, but by and large, the Eagles had the best offensive line in football. Right? They struggled in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs a little bit, but throughout the season, you weren't going to find a more consistent offensive line than the Philadelphia Eagles and how flexible they were in scheme, whether they went zone, whether they went, gap, whether they went power. Like they did a lot of different things with that offensive line that were extremely impressive. And much like with Dak, you need that more so than you need just the raw talent at quarterback, because the NFL is a different game. It is way faster, way more complex, where you don't get weeks off where you play,
directional
Austin P, right? Like,
Right.
directional school, whatever. Like every week you're playing the best of the best of the best, even on, teams like Chicago, Houston, these lower level teams who've kind of been drafting at the top here for the last couple of years. Those players are still legit, guys. Like the teams,
the parity is real.
Yeah. It really is.
You're talking offensive line there, and you're making some really good points. You want to make another really good point there. We saw the resurgence of a quarterback that a lot of folks had written off, and this was one of those that the team was just waiting for this massive contract that they had to absorb to make a trade and all of that to go away, so that they could get to their next quarterback and really start trying to build the franchise. Detroit put a ton of work in their offensive line over the last offseason. That offensive line was one of the best in football. I'd put it probably right behind the Eagles as far as ranking it goes this year. And Jared Goff saw a huge resurgence, so much so to the point that the Lions were relevant. The Lions were fighting for a playoff position going down into Week 17. And we saw the offensive coordinator all of a sudden, start being that quick rising star, interviewing and having his name tossed in the ring for several head coaching jobs, when 8-9 weeks beforehand, they were ready to dismiss and fire the coaching staff there, from a lot of reports that were out there and a lot of beat writers and fans and all of that. Like that line finally started kind of coming through, and it showed you what they could do on that one, and that just kind of puts the exclamation point on that point that you were making there as well. So, but yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of things that these teams need to do in order to do it. You've got some of these teams, though. Chicago is one that they have got to go out and they got to spend a lot of money in free agency, because they have got to go out there and actually get to the league minimum to spend money on it. And there's some other teams that are going to be kind of right in that same ballpark with them and having to spend some money. So it'll be interesting to see how some of these moves and all that work.
I'm going to call my shot now. Jimmy G to Las Vegas. The Josh McDaniels reunion.
I could see that.
Yeah.
I could see that. It's not as, it's probably not as high profile as the rest of that division, but Jimmy G does win games. Like, I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily.
You just need to not
from what you had, though. Like,
you just need to not lose games in the AFC West, right? You just need to not lose games, right? If you can try to prevent self-inflicted wounds in the AFC West, then like it makes it that much harder when you're going up against Kansas City, right? Like you're going to see Kansas City twice. The Chargers are, resurgent, but again, that's a team that has self-inflicted wounds. So like realistically in the AFC West to win, you just need to at least give yourself a shot at, maybe not winning the division, but being there for a wild card spot. Just don't take those self-inflicted wounds. And there is nobody better at that in the NFL right now than Jimmy G, of not creating self-inflicted wounds.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of that, though. The Raiders defense is so bad that they have got to retool a lot on that defense in order to do it, right? There's only so many times that you can be up 17 points in the third and fourth quarter and give away games and give away wins on that one.
Quit drafting the fastest wide receiver in the class and expecting him to be an all-pro punt returner.
Well, it's one of those too that they take it a step further and just start saying, hey, get your scouting in line, because the Raiders are one of those teams that have very, very few of their first round draft picks still on the roster over the last several years. And some of that's due to character issues, right? You look at the year that they took two guys in the first round, both of those guys no longer on the team. And that was 2019, I believe. Like it was not that long ago. And both of those guys no longer on the team there. And that seemingly is just kind of an issue going on with that organization there. So they've got lots of issues there that they need to try and get cleaned up, it seems like. But yes, not drafting the fastest guy because you still believe that old adage that you can teach everything else, but you can't teach speed. The game has evolved to a point where every team has speed and lots of it, and guys go out there and put in the work and just get things done.
Hey, speaking of the fastest guy, did you watch anybody run a 40-yard dash this past weekend?
That happened. Oh yeah, the underwear Olympics.
The underwear Olympics. Shall we get into the combine?
Let's get into the combine real quick. Before we get there, though, we got Steve in the comments here saying that he's a Packers fan. Cowboys' main problem last season was head coach Mike McCarthy. He needs to attack the ball downfield and go for it on fourth down, not score field goals regardless. Well, they got to have a kicker that puts it through the uprights. That helps too. But also, McCarthy's
it was fine until week 15.
I know. McCarthy's going to do some different things, though, right? Like that Dallas defense is really, really good. And part of the problem that Dallas has had is the fact that they turned the ball over a ton the last, especially going down the stretch last season. If you can do that and you can control the game, it's part of the reason I think we see Zeke get his contract restructured. We see Tony Pollard, Tony Pollard's coming back on the tag. I think we're going to see a lot more run than them try and push the ball down the field because they're going to try and control the game more and slow the game down a little bit and try and play behind that defense a little bit more so than what we've seen. Steve's saying that he's also, the grind never stops, wondering how everybody's doing, and saying that the Raiders, be yourself. It's NFL football. Have fun regardless. Go back to speed. What else is new? They could try Jordan Addison, and they'll have a bunch of receivers that I don't know are going to do much of anything. Again, because they need somebody to throw the ball there. Like that's going to be an issue. That's going to be an issue right now. Who's going to throw the ball to the Devontae Adams and whatever very fast receiver they decide to draft there. I'm trying to think on who all they've actually got under contract out there in Las Vegas.
Stidham.
I thought Stidham was under. Well, I thought Stidham was coming off of his contract. I think it's Chase Garbers is the one guy that they've got signed in the QB room.
Without looking, can anyone tell me where he went to college?
North Alabama.
I'll go with the directional school because it ain't anybody mainstream.
Would you like to know where he went to college?
Yeah, since you're looking at it.
California.
He went to Cal?
Known for their football program.
Yes.
Especially of late, their football program.
They do produce quarterbacks like Jared
They
Goff.
have produced quarterbacks. One Aaron Rodgers.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, but yes, let's go ahead and let's talk some combine here, Alex. Let's go ahead and get on into it. That's where you were wanting to take us. Let's head over to the Underwear Olympics, as it is called.
Affectionately known.
Yes.
Okay. What were your guys' takeaways? Because I'm going to play Homer with some of this. So what were your guys' takeaways?
Rightfully, you should play Homer. That dude showed out. I'll tell you what. The timeline went a little crazy on Saturday, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later on. But the timeline went a little crazy on Saturday on Twitter after Anthony Richardson's measurables went out, and I'll tell you what, yes, that guy freak, and I don't want to steal Kevin's thunder because we are going to break down quarterbacks here in a little bit, but I think people were so ready to overreact about something that they found one, they latched onto it, and boy, did they overreact to something.
But did they really overreact? This by all comparisons is the best athlete we've ever seen at quarterback.
Yes, and rightfully so. But
best athlete at quarterback who had a 53.8 completion percentage in college.
Exactly. That's
True.
just it.
Where wide receivers are wide ass open.
Tom Brady was not a great athlete, and how did that work out for him, right? I think Tom Brady is still trying to run a 40-yard dash from when he was at the combine. It does not translate, right? There is so much more to playing quarterback than just being a freak athlete. you have to be smart. You have to be right between the ears, as well as, being gifted athletically. But I thought it was funny how much people were freaking out. At least the timeline that I was, when I checked it, and it was just like Anthony Richardson this, Anthony Richardson that. And it was like, okay, I get that we're all starved for NFL football, but
the combine records were cool though, right?
Right.
I mean, it's always cool when you see a record, regardless of the situation. So, part of that, yeah, it is, it's the explosiveness, right? And that's what everybody's always after, right? They're explosive plays. It's short bursts. Like some of that stuff does translate well. The 40, whatever. But his 10-second split was crazy.
Yeah.
Or his 10-yard split, excuse me. And his broad jump and vertical jump, both being combine records. And I'll get into this here a little bit later. That does speak to his ability to get to where he's going very quickly. We'll see how this translates. I have opinions. I will share them here momentarily. But it was something, at least the records that they're talking about. Like, it's not just, oh, my God, Malik Willis threw it 80 yards. And
yeah,
we saw him in an NFL game, and the dude can't even tie his shoelaces. Like, it was at least better than that.
It's very true. Yeah, it's one of those that it's always amazing when you see somebody that, is bigger than Cam Newton, runs as fast type of thing, has more athletic measurables than some of that. And we saw Cam Newton go on to do become an MVP in the league type of thing. So very interesting there. It was
Kevin,
also.
Oh, I was gonna say, Kevin, go ahead, get your UGA. Go ahead.
Where do I start? Where do I start?
Weird. The team that won back-to-back national champions has like freak dudes playing for them. How strange.
Freak dudes. Like,
How
and
strange.
It's not so. Stetson Bennett, we'll start at quarterback and I'll move off. So Stetson Bennett showed out, right? Like, the drunken disorderly there in Dallas, and everyone's kind of clowning on him, and he came in and he owned it, right? He owned it. He owned it to the GMs, the scouts, the reporters who were asking him about it, like, completely took that one on the chin, and then went out and balled, like absolutely balled. His deep ball was the most impressive deep ball out of anyone in the draft class. It didn't matter who you're talking. Well, that threw, right? Not everybody threw.
Right.
At the combine, he had the most impressive deep ball. His 6'4", his 4.64 40 time was very impressive. No one's talking about his hand size because it was right at 10 inches. So you're not having the, oh my gosh, Kenny Pickett, he has tiny hands thing going on. But you saw the accuracy, right? He nailed the passing drills. Like, he was geared up for that game, that tryout, if you will, at the combine. And it cemented him as a day 2 pick. It cemented him as a day 2 pick. I think it's going to be 4th round. Now, I believe I said that all along. So I don't know that necessarily my opinion of him didn't increase because I watch him every week, right? I've seen him every week for the last, 3 seasons when he's been at Georgia after coming back out from JUCO. So a lot of this wasn't a huge surprise. It will be interesting to see what this translates to, right? Where his backup opportunities are. But I think we're going to see a very long career out of Bennett, even if it's the Chase Daniels route and he's just the backup. Playing 13 years in the NFL as a backup quarterback is a heck of a job. And backup quarterbacks often get changed in and out. And if you can make a double-digit year career out of that, you've done better than 98% of NFL players by lasting that long, right? So I thought Bennett did a great job for himself. Darnell Washington, the Big O, that one-handed grab in the passing drills, I think people will be looking at that for years to come. Like, he is such a freak athlete, and I talked about him a little bit last week. but you saw it throughout the way he moved the blocking sleds. He moved that blocking sled easier than a lot of the offensive linemen did. Like, and
did you hear Rich's reaction to it? He's like,
No,
oh my
I
God,
didn't.
he's gonna run it into the end zone.
And he just did. He hit it and was stride, right? His helmet was center mass just like it should have been. And it was just big thundering steps pushing that sled back. He had the 40 time to match. His hands are there. Like, GMs are going to salivate as they continue to watch this and more film. And head coaches, I'm sure, are already trying to figure out how they can use him because he does play, blocker and receiver so well. But it'll lead to a lot of matchup issues. So he was awesome. And then Nolan Smith will be kind of the last one I touched on. Didn't get to play because of the torn pec in the championship game because he tore that pec against Florida. No. Yeah. Anyway, so he missed the back end of the season, went out and blazed. 4.39 40, was an absolute freak through some of these metrics. You could tell he had been training for it. He's in great shape, and having him come off the edge is going to be something fun to watch here for years to come. So they showed out, right? They had 12 players at the combine. Obviously the Jalen Carter news, I will acknowledge that, right? Like that hurt, right? He was in all regards the number one pick. The Bears should have been taking him number one. And now we're going to see where he falls, right? Like he said, he's going to be cleared. We're going to see how long it takes for this investigation to go and what comes from it and how he's able to meet with teams, and him and his representatives in his camp are able to kind of put their best foot forward and work their way through this. I will still be shocked if he gets out of day one. I will still be shocked if he gets out of day one. He is that good of an athlete.
Uh-huh.
Yes, the character issue is not great, but for Pete's sake, we draft, I say we, the NFL drafts wide receivers with more character issues almost every year than, what this was. It was a tragic accident. Like, I'm not trying to take away from that, but focusing solely on football. It was a stupid decision coming off the ultimate high of his life and back-to-back championships. And it's a shame that it's now tarnishing what he's able to do on the field, but I understand why teams have to take a good hard look at this because it is a massive financial investment into any player who is going to be signed to a 4 or 5 year deal, right? Depending on the round and how that works out. Like, they need to make sure that you purposely don't miss in the first round. And so I understand why they're looking at that, but I still think he lands in the first round, and some team at the bottom of the first round, like the Steelers are going to end up with Jalen Carter, or the Patriots are going to end up with Jalen Carter. And we're all going to go, yeah, of course, of course, like this just fits right in. Of course it is. It's going to make everyone's life more difficult. So
right.
We'll see how it shakes out.
It's not that these are equivalent, and I don't want to, make that, but when you talk about character issues and dudes that were very talented, on the football field, and then something came out, in the 11th hour, Laramie Tunsil, right? Like it was kind of that same thing where, they got the picture of him with the bong or whatever it was, the gas mask on, right before draft night, and his stock tumbled. And guess what? Laramie Tunsil has been a pretty good professional, at least in terms of production, since he got in the league.
Well, I've seen several mock drafts coming out, today, right after the combine, yesterday and today, that still had Carter as a mid first, even with all of the news and that kind of stuff there. So there's a good chance that you see the Bears trade down not once but twice. I've seen that, some of those types of scenarios coming through where they can trade down not once but twice and still go get him with the mid round first.
I just don't know who's paying for that first overall.
I think that you're going to see the fact that we saw Anthony Richardson show up like he did. You're going to see some teams, I think, go up and try and get him, which is then going to put some pressure on both Houston and in Indianapolis that they're going to have to go up and get their guy, right? You've also got the Raiders sitting with a, kind of down there. They could go up and get their guy. Because when you look at who's sitting number 5, number 6, right? Like Seattle sitting number 5. Yes, they just signed Geno to a 3-year, $105 million deal, but they know that that's a bridge quarterback and they could easily take, one of these guys sitting there at number 5 on quarterback. So if you're one of these quarterback needy teams, you got to get up ahead of number 5 there for sure. I believe who's picking number 6? I forget who's at number 6, but number 6 should be another one of those spots where we see another quarterback fall in kind of a sneaky move there. The Lions could be going out there and getting their guy to go behind Goff and get their guy that they're going to develop there. So if you're the Raiders and you don't get your free agent guy there, you have got to get up ahead of Detroit. You got to get up ahead of Seattle to go up and get that. Indianapolis is not going to trade you their pick. So that comes down to, and Houston's not going to be moving down either. So that comes down to Arizona, that comes down to Chicago, and who you're going to, who can make that go. So I think that we've had enough of these quarterbacks kind of show up and show out there that you're going to see some teams like Las Vegas, like Atlanta, Carolina, all of those guys sitting kind of in that, 7, 8, 9 spot that could go up and get their guy. There's enough there that I think that we're going to see these guys make some moves and try and make some things happen and try and move up there. So I think we saw just enough with, Bryce Young. We'll see what he shows up and what his stock looks like after Pro Day, but I think that'll still be sitting there pretty good. The fact that CJ Stroud looked really, really good mechanically throwing the ball. There, Anthony Richardson testing out like he did. And there's a lot of teams still incredibly high on Will Levis. And we'll get to all of these quarterbacks here in a little bit, but I think that there's enough going on with some of these quarterbacks that somebody is going to want to go up there and get that number 1 spot to make sure that they get their guy, and they're not sitting there holding the bag, hoping for another quarterback and going through it that way. Especially when you start looking at the 7, 8, 9 type of picks there. So lots of question marks there with those 3 teams. So any other thoughts on the combine? Anything that stood out to you?
No, I think overall these players, I think everybody pretty much did what they needed to do. Like there were not too many duds as far as how they performed at the combine. I think is it the tight end from Oregon State that everyone was kind of falling in love with, and I can't even remember his name now. I'm terrible. I'm sorry. He kind of had a lackluster performance, so I think it did kind of open the door and close the gap there as far as the tight end race went. But overall, I mean, the big uglies did what they do. I didn't think that there was anybody who hurt their draft stock as far as who we thought was going to be top end of the draft or a day 1 pick necessarily. I'm still not blown away by any of these wide receivers necessarily. Now, getting them on the field, maybe it shows a little bit different, but I'm just not on the belief that there's that many difference makers as far as wide receiver goes. But
a lot of slot type of wide receivers in this class again, right?
Yeah.
Like this reminds me of about 2 years ago when we were talking about, it's a class full of slot wide receivers.
I think that's kind of where the NFL's, or excuse me, I think that's where college is going with some of these, right? Because you're spreading so many of these teams out. You want these speed guys because you can get behind the defense, the quick scores, right? It's the Ohio State mantra, the Oklahoma mantra, now USC, right? Since Lincoln Riley went there, like these quick scoring, prolific offenses, they don't have true X's, right? They have a bunch of Y's and Z's who can make a guy miss and do a lot of sluggos and get behind a defense, or they run a deep post or a quick slant and create separation. It's not, the 7-yard curl guy that you use to move the chains. That's not the college game right now.
Yeah, it amazes me how many of these wide receivers that we're going to see taken in the first, second, third round of this draft class that are, 5'9", 5'10", 5'11", even 6 foot, and they're all, under 180 pounds. Like that's one of the things that's kind of amazing to me is the fact that you really don't have that big body alpha type of wide receiver out there.
Yeah.
I do think Bijan Robinson got himself paid. I think he put himself, not that he would like that there were many questions, but I think he put himself as a first round running back, which is a return to a running back being selected in the first round because we did not have that last year.
No,
right.
And it's scary, right? Like you see the teams drafting at the end of this first round, you add that type of player, right? I mean,
somebody's going to get a workhorse, and somebody that probably doesn't deserve a workhorse is going to get a workhorse.
Yeah, I mean, it's fodder. I shouldn't say it's fodder, but it leads to debate, right? With all this speculation and the issues that Joe Mixon's been having. If you're Cincinnati and you're picking there at 28, do we need these problems with Joe Mixon right now, or can we grab this guy and just reset it? And now, by not having to worry about Joe Mixon, another young guy in the fold, now we have, our really it's a four-headed monster between Chase, Higgins, Burrow, and Robinson. Like that's crazy offensive.
Watch the Giants take him at 25, and then they've got Saquon on the franchise. They've got Bijan there, and then away we go. Right? They can't figure out wide receiver, but this isn't necessarily a class to go out there and do that in. But could you imagine that with Brian Dable getting to run a wishbone with those two type of guys?
Right. Or if he falls and lands at the Eagles at 30.
Right.
Yeah.
Good night.
I hope wherever he lands, he gets to be the bell cow back because he needs to be a bell cow back, right?
Yeah, he flashed his hands well. He caught the ball really well at the combine.
Right. But he needs to eat. He needs to have touches.
It's going to be pass pro, right? That's going to determine whether he can be an early 3-down back in this league. Is how fast can he pick up on the blocking schemes and concepts. He's big enough to stick his nose in there and to chip and slow down blitzing linebackers. Like he's got the size to do it. Does he have the instinct and the recognition to be able to do that and not sacrifice his quarterback just to get his own?
Yeah. Right. But I think he's a first round. I think he goes in the first round.
I'd agree. I think he does.
Be comfortable with that.
And Gibbs also showed out really well. I think he moved up from really solidified himself as being the number 2 back in this draft class, right behind Robinson.
So I think that Gibbs goes to the Bears with the first pick of the second round.
That's kind of what I was thinking there too. I could also see it too that the Saints hedge their bets there a little bit and take him, right there at the tail end with that pick that they just acquired for Peyton. You've got a running back that may not be available for you next year, or may not be available for much of the season.
Yeah, with the AK problems.
Yep. And I mean, you talk about who's the comp for Gibbs? It's Alvin Kamara as far as a skill set goes. So you could see the Saints do something like that.
Saints could also go with the hometown kid there out of Tulane.
Could. I don't think that Tajay Spears, who you're talking about there. Tajay Spears is nowhere near a first round type of grade there. Jamar Gibbs, I think, could sneak up in there. Tajay Spears. I
like him.
I like him too, but I don't.
I hope he lands on a good team
because
he's going to be one of those dudes where whoever gets him in our fantasy draft, there's going to be curse words said by other members of the league when he goes. If it's in the right spot, there's going to be curse words said.
Right. I mean, this is a guy that I actually kind of really like for a lot of redraft type of leagues because, quite frankly, he's going to sneak down in there and probably be a late second round, third round type of grade. I think is where we'll see him go, and he'll sneak under the radars of a lot of kind of casual fantasy players there to the point where the rest of us will scoop him up and be elated by
laugh
that.
all the way to our playoff
Right.
berth.
Quite
Yes.
possibly. I mean, you can get some run out of this kid. He'll be good.
Yeah, and we'll talk a whole lot more about running backs here in the coming weeks. But are we ready to talk about some of our quarterbacks and get into some of the breakdowns on these guys here?
I believe we are.
Yes,
All righty. Alex, you're going to start us off. You have got the Bryce Young here.
Yeah, so he came in, put on a little bit of weight from his Alabama days. I think Alabama had him listed at like 195, 194. He's now at 204 is what they've weighed him at in Indianapolis. Probably got himself some cheese curds on his way through Wisconsin, getting to Indy from California. He did have a comp to Kyler in terms of size, right? Kyler had about the same measurables. And I think Kyler's hand was a little bit smaller than Bryce Young's, but pretty much comparable in size to Kyler Murray. There is a question about his accuracy, his ability to drive the ball down the field. Deep throws aren't exactly all that sharp. So those are questions that need to be that he needs to work on. What he does have going for him, though, understands NFL concepts. He had Bill O'Brien as, his OC there at Alabama. So that helps. Bill O'Brien obviously was a coach in the NFL. I don't know that I want to throw an adjective in front of Bill O'Brien's NFL tenure, but he was in the NFL. So he does understand NFL concepts and can understand and has at least been exposed to ideas and concepts that NFL coaches think about. Obviously, he played on the biggest stages in college and was a proven winner. And if Chicago's not the number one, if Chicago's not drafting number one, Bryce Young's going number one.
All righty, I like it. Let's go ahead and head on over and talk about C.J. Stroud, the quarterback out of Ohio State. He's a redshirt sophomore, 6'3", 214. And this guy's a player. He has got a very accurate arm, puts the ball where only the receiver can get it, has some pretty good arm movement and some arm talent there. As far as some knocks on it goes, he hesitates to use his legs. He's got some decent mobility. He just hesitates to really take off on some of those things and use his mobility to extend plays there. And he has a tendency to focus very heavily on his primary target, doesn't necessarily come off into the progressions as quickly as you may like to see in some other NFL quarterbacks there. All of those things are very easy things to work on it and something that you're going to see, the quarterback coach, offensive coordinators really kind of rely on it and working through the progressions quicker. So I think that those will be things that we see him improve upon quickly. I think the best fit for CJ Stroud is going to be the Detroit Lions. I think that if he can go there, sit behind Goff for like a season on that one, we're going to see some really, really good things. Scheme-wise, I think they've got some really good things going there. Also allows him to come in and get some receivers that can have some big playmaking ability and some, really kind of relate his talents really well to that one as well. Ultimately, though, I think his likely landing spot is going to be the Indianapolis Colts. I think that they may end up trying to move up to go get this guy here after the Texans ultimately move up and take Bryce Young. I think that's the way that we're going to see this one play out there. But yeah, I do think that the best situations that Stroud is able to come in to a team, sit for about a year, really kind of get acclimated to that game, and we're going to see him take off. And I think that he could be really, really good if that's the scenario. However, if he goes to a place like Indianapolis, he goes to a place like the Texans, he goes to a place that he's going to have to come in and start right away, we're going to see him kind of in the bottom half of starting quarterbacks from a fantasy impact there. But from a dynasty, you're still going to see this guy go in the first round. From a super flex type of deal for redraft, this is going to be one of those that, we're going to be seeing him back half of the quarterback room, and deservedly so there.
Oh, you guys jumped it on me. That show doc shows Sorry, guys. I'm changing my sheet here at the moment because the show doc said I had Will Levis first.
We've called, as they say in the biz, an audible.
All right. So Anthony. So I guess we'll get started here.
Omaha.
No doubt. Freak athlete. Right. Like just absolutely off the charts. Was the darling of the combine, if you will, right? So stands 6'4", 244 pounds. So again, Cam Newton-esque. That's where some of those comparisons come through. 10.5-inch hands. So you don't have to worry about the fumble rooskies nearly as much, but a 4.43 40. His 10-yard split was 1.53. Like that is really good. 40.5-inch vertical and it's like a 10'9" broad jump is what it was. So very high profile athlete. Now, quarterback. Passing drills were, as a passer, he's average. Like his arm, he has a above average arm. His instincts are okay. His mechanics are sloppy, and his footwork's not that great, right? Like, so those are some of the things that he's instantly going to have to work on. But from a fantasy aspect, he is a cheat code. Like, he is instantly a cheat code because of how well he can use his legs. He can absorb those big hits, and he's able to, kind of release the ball while defenders are hanging on to him a little bit, like Cam, like Ben Roethlisberger, that type of thing. So I think his biggest problems are going to be decision-making. I think the NFL game is going to blow his mind here to begin with. Like, it is going to be a struggle in the passing game, kind of like what we saw with, Justin Fields, right? All the fantasy points came from the legs. Richardson has the athleticism to do that, which will help him and continue to buy him time in the NFL to catch up. But because of that decision-making process and his accuracy, he is going to struggle a little bit, right? Like I said earlier, it was at 53.8, 56.8% in college, where receivers are wide freaking open. Like, that's not very good. By comparison, Stetson Bennett was 68.7. Will Levis was 63.5. All these guys are in the same conference. Bryce Young, like, same conference. He had a 67.2 complete percentage. Like, you can compare because they played the same teams, right? So Hooker was up there as well. Excuse me. I didn't mean to leave him out. So all these guys that we're talking about, all coming out of the SEC, are facing the same competition, especially for the four guys on the East, right? Bennett, Hooker, Levis, and Richardson all played each other. They all were on that side of the conference. Bryce Young was in the West. So, he played against Florida and Tennessee, didn't play against Georgia, whatever. So you have comparisons right here in these top guys that we're looking at and how they handled Georgia specifically, just because that was the best defense on that side of the division. And that's what we can closest to professional, right? They all struggled, but Richardson was terrible. I mean, Georgia absolutely made him look silly. They also did it with Hooker for the first half. Hooker did kind of release a little bit in the third quarter, and then they pulled him when the game got out of hand. So Richardson, I think he's going to be exciting. I think a team like the Raiders do take a chance on him, right? It's a big play name where it brings that cachet to the position that matches the rest of the division with Mahomes and Herbert and Wilson. So I do think the Raiders could possibly take a flyer here on Jordan Richardson. And I think it'd be something a little bit different. But McDaniels also drafted Tebow, right? So again, running more of a run first, work on mechanics style quarterback. Not that, they're the same athlete, but we've seen McDaniels do something like this before. So I think that kind of matches up well.
All right. At the aforementioned Hendon Hooker. You've got him here at 6'3", 217. That's what I've got him at, 6'3", 217. You see that redshirt senior. Hendon Hooker's been around. Good size at 6'3", 217. That's pretty good, comparable size in the NFL for most quarterbacks. The problem is he's already 25 and he's coming off a torn ACL. And that's going to be tough for some of these NFL franchises to want to invest in that. Some other knocks against him is accuracy in the middle needs some improvement. Those throws between the hashes, those are the ones that need improvement. And he takes on too much contact as a runner, which, as we've seen in the NFL, leads to not great outcomes. There's also this knock about him in terms of, is it the Vols offense, or can he work in any offense? Because he worked really well in the Vols offense. Does that translate to making multiple reads, allowing plays to develop, deciphering defenses? Tennessee's offense was pretty simplistic for him, and allowed him to shine because it didn't require him to think too much. Which is not the case in the NFL. Good things going for him. He has high-end footwork. His footwork is top tier. He stays on time, like we saw with what Tennessee gave him. Everything was timed. Everything was timing routes, timing throws, and he was able to stay on time, stay in rhythm, which is something that he likes to do, is be a rhythm passer. And he is risk averse. His touchdown to interception ratio his last 2 years was something like 58-5. Like he was very good at not turning the ball over. So risk averse. Basically, if you're a coach and you tell Hendon Hooker what to do, Hendon Hooker is going to do it, which I think a lot of NFL coaches will like. I think some likely landing spots for him, if what Kevin says doesn't come to fruition and the Raiders don't take Anthony Richardson, I could see him there. Atlanta, I could see him there. And here's the other one that I think is kind of interesting. I could see Baltimore maybe going with this guy to make their lives a little bit easier as they deal with the Lamar Jackson situation. Best case scenario, though, for Hendon Hooker, I think he's going to need to go somewhere where he can sit and learn the complexities of the NFL game, learn how to read defenses, learn how to make decisions where it isn't just laid out for him. So I think that's best case scenario for him. I don't think he is more than a high-end backup, low-end starter, unless something drastically improves over the course of his career.
Fair. All righty, I got Clayton Tune, the senior out of Houston, 6'2", 220, playing quarterback over there. Clayton Tune, pretty good mobility on that. He's got the ability to extend plays. Kind of that dual threat guy. He's got good short and intermediate accuracy. However, there's issues with the arm strength. There's issues with his downfield accuracy. You know, if you give him a pass that's 20 yards and in, he can hit it and can hit it with timing and rhythm, but 30 yards beyond, right? Like, the ball starts becoming kind of errant going down the field. I think that really what you're going to see him in is kind of that perpetual backup role. We probably see this guy end up, going somewhere in like the 5th, maybe 6th round type of thing. This is a guy that for your dynasty type of drafts, you're probably going to be taking him, 3rd, 4th round type of thing if he's even drafted there. A lot of it's going to depend on his landing spot there, but he does have some comparisons out there to a Brock Purdy type of QB there. And as far as like a really good fit for him would be a fit like the Rams, where he can come in, he's a backup, can learn the system under a really good coach like McVay there. But overall, Clayton Tune, we'll see him drafted, but it's not going to be a high draft capital, and I don't think that we're going to really see him utilized much early in his career, short of an injury.
All right, the guy I thought I had first. So Will Levis, 6'4", 229 pounds, out of Kentucky. This guy has a monster arm. monster arm, and for that, he also has a elite quick release. So it is very compact. He gets it out quickly and can throw the ball, over the side of that mountain, right? If we're gonna go with the stories there. So at Kentucky, his offensive line was not very good at Kentucky. He did have to use his mobility. He's quick enough to evade the rush. He'll be able to scamper fairly well at the NFL level. They'll probably have a couple design runs for him, but it's not, elite Lamar Jackson type speed. But he's big enough to absorb those hits. He is actually much more accurate than what some of his statistics look like because of the poor offensive line play, and about 80% of his interceptions throughout his career were, if we broke them down, it was receiver faulted, right? Tip pass, wrong route, or they cut one short or something like that. And so you go back through and you look at the film, a lot of those aren't actually his fault. He is much more accurate than his statistics look, which is why we watch game film. His footwork is okay, but he does still rely on his arm strength more than probably what's necessary. So the NFL coaching or quarterback coaches will definitely be taking a look at his footwork. The timing of decisions is something that still needs a little bit of work, but he's a smart guy, right? He's a 4.0 GPA, very, very intelligent guy. So I think once they get into some film rooms and kind of work through some of the kinks, he has a shot to have a really, at least a decent career as a pro, right? Depending on how he develops and everything else. I think that a landing spot that makes sense is Carolina. They're in the first round. We know that they're going to be needing a quarterback, bring this next guy in and probably sit him. Again, you want to sit these guys for the first year. I'm not going to say he's NFL ready because I don't believe any of the quarterbacks this year are. But I do think that he could provide a boost in that quarterback room there for Carolina. But Will Levis is a guy that I think we'll continue to see more and more hype about him as we get closer to the draft. We'll get through his pro day. He'll get to show off his arm a little bit more. He'll be in front of the whiteboards. We'll start hearing a lot of good things. So I think Levis is one of those guys that we're not talking about a whole lot right now because of Anthony Richardson, and he's not, CJ Stroud or Bryce Young. But I do think as we get up there, there's a good chance that Levis is going to be the third quarterback taken this year when it comes to draft day.
Yeah, I could certainly see that one coming to fruition there. All righty, let's go ahead and hit up the all-important question here. Who is drafted first between Max Duggan and Stetson Bennett?
So last week, I don't think we were on the air. I think it was right afterwards when we were talking about this. You asked the question, and I said, it should be Bennett, but it's probably going to be Duggan. And that was before, obviously, the combine. Now I'm changing that. It is Stetson Bennett, and it's really not even close. Max Duggan's a nice story, but Max Duggan is not nearly as ready for the NFL as Stetson Bennett is. And the combine started to show that. Obviously, we'll get into more of that, but he wasn't nearly as accurate. His measurables might be slightly better just because he's a little bit taller, a little bit thicker framed. Speed slightly faster, right? He's just a touch faster than what Stetson Bennett is. He's not as accurate. He doesn't make decisions as quickly. His footwork's not as polished. Like, this is where Stetson Bennett being in a Todd Monken offense is making him pro ready. Like, I think that's really part of how easy Monken made Bennett's transition from college and to what's going to be the pros is you'll see some very seamless transitions. Some things Bennett's going to have to work on, no doubt, but I do think that a lot of the initial hiccups and landmines that you might see for young quarterbacks, I think Bennett being, 35 years old, no, I'm just kidding. But I mean,
he'll be 26,
right? I mean, he's an older guy. But I do think that with that and his challenges and determination, his story, He's a gritty guy who's not going to give up on you. So Duggan had the nice story, kind of came out of nowhere, right? He was the starter, then he wasn't the starter, and then he was the starter again, led TCU to the national championship game. So he has a great story as well. I just don't think he's nearly as refined or polished for the NFL game. So I think where you see Bennett go in the 4th round, I think Bennett could I think Duggan, you'll probably see 5th, 6th round type thing as teams try and fill out their draft. And he's going to be more of a project than what Stetson Bennett is.
I think I agree with you. Here's the reason why I posed the question in the first place is because essentially, not just because they were the last two guys that we got to watch play a college football game, right? Like they're essentially the same guy, not in terms of their physicality or their build, but their makeup in terms of their mentality, their makeup in terms of their resiliency,
persistence, maybe.
Yeah, also that. Yeah, their persistence. I just think that it's a great story, and they weren't necessarily. I know that Max Duggan kind of had to will his team along in a lot of situations, whereas Stetson Bennett needed to just captain the ship a lot of times. And don't get me wrong, fantastic playmaker in his own right, but to me, this is 6 of one, half dozen of another. Now, what I do think is that Stetson Bennett, yes, he is older. He has many more snaps under his belt that has allowed him to refine his game. And he got to play against some of the best defenses. And hell, he got to go against the best defense every day in practice, right? When you do good on good, which I'm sure doesn't happen all the time in Georgia, but it happens enough that it will make him better. Yeah. So like that is a huge plus for Stetson Bennett. Max Duggan, look, he has a will that is hard to deny, right? Like that dude carried TCU through some of those dog days games, some of those games that they had no business winning. And they were winning because Max Duggan carried them through them. I do think Stetson Bennett goes first. I think the SEC pedigree gives him just a leg higher. But if you go through and look at, the combine and what they did, Stetson Bennett, he participated in everything. Excuse me, not Stetson Bennett. Max Duggan competed in everything. Stetson didn't. Not for nothing, but the want to is there from Max Duggan. I think whatever team he lands on, I don't think Max Duggan is a starter in this league. And likewise, I'm not necessarily sold that Stetson Bennett is a starter in this league on a consistent basis. But I do think it is interesting that these two guys who played in the national championship, different playing styles because different things were asked of them, and different paths to get to where they were playing in that national title game. But I still think I think it's an interesting watch. It's going to be an interesting watch to see how those chips fall. But I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of go right around each other in terms of when they're picked. I do think both of them get drafted, though. Like that's obviously we kind of assume that with the question posed, but I think they kind of go near each other.
So I've got Max Duggan, especially kind of going through this. He's going to be sixth or 7th round guy. Realistically, I think the Cowboys are going to probably scoop him up in the 6th or 7th round type of deal, right? Like they've got the
hometown discount, yeah,
right. Like that's where I think that we're going to see him ultimately go is probably the Cowboys to a backup 3rd string practice squad type of guy there. Now Stetson Bennett is going to go pick 124. That's where I've got him. That's a 4th round pick. And
who owns the 124th pick, Derek?
Well, that would be the Baltimore Ravens would be owning the 124th overall pick there. One, they've got some questions at the quarterback position long term there. The fact that he played really well in the new offensive coordinator's position, or new offensive coordinator's scheme for the last few years, won a national championship with the guy 2 years in a row there. I think that there's a lot to be said there, right? If nothing else, he comes in kind of as that pro ready type of deal. The Ravens also don't have any quarterbacks under, besides a franchise tag type of thing under contract this season. So, and not only that, Stetson Bennett isn't as athletic, isn't as elusive as Lamar Jackson, but they can ultimately, you don't have to drastically modify the playbook either to do that one. And it's a playbook that Stetson's already familiar with. So that's where I'm calling my shot is pick 124 for Stetson Bennett.
Is there a world where Max Duggan goes in front of him?
It's going to have to be something. There's going to have to be something drastic that comes out there that's going to change that one. But no, I don't think so. I think Max did not do himself many favors throwing the ball this weekend. So, you also look at some of the medical stuff that goes in the past there. That's one of those that there are teams that get, even though he's, that some of those conditions and some of that stuff he's long played out in college, you do see some of these NFL teams get a little skittish about some of those types of things down the road as well. So, that's the thing. I think Max Duggan is, 6th, 7th round guy. We could potentially see him heading for the XFL or the USFL quicker than later.
What are the possibilities that Sean Payton takes a semi-comparable Drew Brees clone in said 4th or 5th round of this year's draft to put some pressure on Mr. Wilson?
Derek, would you remind me, where are the Broncos picking in the 4th round?
Oh, now I got to pull that up.
I'm sorry.
But I don't know that you're going to see the Broncos necessarily do that, just from the standpoint they've got George Payton is drafting for his job.
No, he's not.
He's drafting for his job in this one. That's I do firmly believe that the fact that the ownership group took control of the interview process for head coach, all of that, he was just kind of there.
You know who he drafted? Sean Payton. Sean Payton counts as his first round pick.
That's a first round draft pick right there.
If you don't like that, Russell Wilson was his first round pick and Sean Payton was his second. I don't care how you spin that.
Fair enough. That was that. Russell Wilson was his first round pick last year, sure, and this year. But George Payton has not had a great track record of drafting. Right, we've long made the joke that it's got to be better than Elway, but it's not that far off, to be honest with you. Right, had Peyton made some better draft picks even a couple of years ago, Broncos wouldn't have been in the quarterback dilemma that they're in right now. Right, they would have a rookie, or they would have a guy still on his rookie deal, or they could have taken a guy that's quickly being referred to as the best defensive player in the NFL right now. But no, they took a cornerback. And yes, I
arguably one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, at least. And believe me, I was not happy with that pick. We can go back and we can show the tape.
Right,
not happy with that pick.
I still think that there was 2 options on the table that would have been better for them to do than what the direction they went. But anyway, so looking at the Broncos draft picks, they have a 3rd round pick 68 from Indianapolis, 3rd round pick 69 that they've earned. Then you've got the 4th round at 108. The 5th round at 140, the 6th round 194, and the 7th round 247. So they've got 6 total picks in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
So at 108, is that too early to take a Stetson Bennett? Is 108 too early, knowing that 16 picks later, Baltimore there is lurking with somebody who may or may not take him? Is it too rich to take a quarterback with your second pick in the draft.
Third.
But,
Excuse me, sorry.
And I don't know that the Broncos are going to do that. I don't think that you're going to see Sean Payton go after a quarterback there. I don't.
No, he's going to trade that pick to the Saints for Taysom Hill.
That's probably more likely. Except yeah. And at that point, right, you could probably go out and I don't know. I think Aiden O'Connell, if he's still around at that point, is going to be the guy to go there. But I think Aiden O'Connell is probably a third-round guy.
No way.
I think he goes before Stetson. He's got the pro.
Yeah,
he's
maybe
got,
the better question.
He's got the prototypical.
How many quarterbacks
build.
are taken? How many quarterbacks are taken in front of Stetson Bennett?
6.
Yeah, I would say right about 6.
6.
Yeah, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, Hendon Hooker, and I think Aiden O'Connell.
Man.
God.
You could see Jaron Hall sneak up in there as well. We've seen these NFL teams get this weird proclivity to go out and just draft BYU quarterbacks.
BYU quarterbacks,
yeah.
man.
Yeah, because it works out so well.
Steve Young.
Yeah.
More recently, I think there was somebody who was not as successful as Steve Young. Didn't quite have the same career path as Steve Young from BYU. His name is escaping me at the moment, but I have a feeling he's going to be one of the 200,000 Americans filing for unemployment here soon.
Yeah, his contract's guaranteed. It's a rookie deal.
What a lucky bastard.
He's set. He's fine. He'll be fine. The only thing not guaranteed is that 5th year on him. He's still got 2 years of gainful employment, in which his contract will pay him. But yeah, I mean, that's another one of those, right? Like that's an interesting deal too. Like just to sit there and think about who's going to play quarterback for the Jets next season.
Who's going to play quarterback for the Packers who's playing
Jordan
quarterback
Love.
for the
Jordan
Jets?
Love. I like what I saw out of Jordan
Do you
Love.
really
looked
think they're
good,
going to
yes.
stay with him?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Huh.
I'm almost cussed.
And quite frankly, like the Packers have shown you that's the way to go out and develop a quarterback.
That's
and
fair.
to bring a quarterback along, right? We saw that with the Chiefs. Who's the best quarterback in the league right now? It's Patrick Mahomes. Down question, right?
He only sat part of a year.
He's had his rookie year.
His rookie year. He played week 17 because the Chiefs didn't care they were playing the Broncos.
Right. So, but he sat a year and got brought along, right? Like, and we've seen that where quarterbacks that tend to sit out a year and tend to get a year of development are far better suited to come in and actually play at that level than when we see these teams draft these guys early and they get thrown to the wolves and they're bouncing from team to team 3 years, 4 years in after being taken in the top 5 picks. So that's Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love's, I think what we saw last year, I think we're going to see some pretty good things out of him going forward. And I think the Packers saw enough that they're ready to move on from their $60 million a year quarterback this year.
I concur.
And I can't tell if we broke Alex or if he's frozen there.
You broke me. But no, I honestly was just looking at the wide receiver class and not looking forward to when we get to break down a bunch of dudes that are good, not great. Not bad, not great, just good.
But this running back class, that's a great class.
It's a really good running back.
It's gonna be some good running backs, yeah.
Tight end class, really good tight end class. This is one of those we could see. Would not surprise me to see 2 to 3 tight ends taken in the first round of this draft.
Yeah.
Would not surprise me at all.
I mean, yeah.
and I think so much so to the point where you're going to probably see 5 taken before the second round's over. Like this is a really good tight end class.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. And teams are so desperate for difference makers, right?
Quality,
It's a positional difference. And whether it's overall athleticism and just being a receiving tight end and a mismatch down the field, or whether it's an overall idea of what you're looking at. But I mean, this tight end class is probably the best we've seen in
a long time,
a decade, if not more, top to bottom. Like, it's just a really solid tight end class that I think a lot of people are going to get frustrated with in dynasty leagues, right? Because we all draft tight ends and they expect them to come out of the gates and be amazing. But you look back on this class 3 years from now, and I think there's going to be a lot of those tight ends in starting roles for their teams. It's not just a complimentary piece.
Yes, very much so. Alrighty, guys. Well, any other thoughts here on the drafts, the combine, any of the other good stuff we've talked about?
Word to the wise. We're all excited that the combine's here. Don't do rookie drafts until you know what team they're on. Like, it really does matter so much. Like, we can talk about these guys and comps and how we think they're going to look, and all this information is going to be pouring out. Don't do rookie drafts until the NFL draft is there, because you have players. Rashad Bateman is a prime example.
Mm-hmm.
We all really liked Rashad Bateman coming out of college. As soon as he got drafted by Baltimore, he instantly dropped a round and a half, because that offense is anemic. Now,
yes,
we'll see what Todd Monken is able to do with that offense, and if Bateman's able to kind of have some resurgence. But just the way that thing's fundamentally made, I still think Bateman's a guy who's going to be capped at like 65 catches.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's not going to be the guy that we thought he could have been coming out of college.
Nope. Any other thoughts out there? Any final thoughts? Alrighty. Well, that's going to do it for us tonight. Make sure that you're hitting us up on all those socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, at Good Old Boys FF. And then, of course, head on over to the YouTube channel. Click the subscribe button. Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast YouTube channel. Best way to support this independent podcast. But that's going to do it for us. He's Kevin. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloos.